Today on Pilgrim Radio's His People, Justin Poythress on living well by embracing quiddity.
What happens rightfully understood in a Christian focus towards quiddity is that you see the thatness of the circumstance that you are in as designed by a creator who loves you. And there is a personal connection with this God. It's not just an abstract, impersonal universe, but that God has actually designed the very time, place, circumstances you're in with the explicit purpose of you discovering Him.
Justin Poythress next. Today we discuss a word you probably haven't heard of, quiddity. I know it's new to me. As Idaho pastor Justin Poythress puts it, it means the thatness of something. For example, your house is in that neighborhood rather than another. Spencer Dahlke is with Justin to discuss his piece, Embrace Your Life by Enjoying Quiddity.
Quiddity is not really a term that we interact with every day. What drew you to the idea of quiddity, and why did you feel like it was important to write about now?
I think that what landed me in the term, to be honest, was most of my book, or I shouldn't say most of it, a large chunk of it centers around this idea of givenness. And as I wrestled with kind of explaining this idea, it occurred to me, there's already a word for this, because givenness isn't a real word. I made that up. Maybe I should just kind of talk about the one that's already there. And it's also a weird word, and C.S. Lewis wrote about it, so you got immediate clout with any Christian. It's like, oh, great, C.S. Lewis talked about this. Well, it must be important. That was some of the draw. But the concept itself, quiddity, is the thatness of something. It has to do with the specificity, I guess might be one of the best synonyms, the specificity of a certain circumstance and context. I call that givenness in a sense, but there's a real value and increasing value in the increasingly online world that we live in of discovering and appreciating quiddity, givenness, whatever it is, rather than, I think the alternative is escape. Escapism, let me get out of what this is because it's not that interesting.
Is there a difference, perhaps, between quiddity and uniqueness? And if there is, I'm curious what you think that might be.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't love the word uniqueness. Maybe that was just because my high school English teacher banned us from using that word. I understand some of his frustration is that it gets a little bit overplayed. It's a little bit cliched. The two are very similar, but I think that honestly, I think unique has a lot more baggage in the sense that the way that we tend to understand unique is, first of all, it's personal. It's very much like, oh, well, I'm a unique person. And it could be, hey, this is a unique situation. But I think unique, the way that we phrase that automatically builds in a immediate elevated sense of this is really special versus quiddity. You have to do a lot of times more digging because quiddity, I think, carries with it a more of a connotation of the ordinary, that every moment has quiddity to it. Now, you could say every moment is unique. Every hour is unique. Of course it is. It's not producible because that's the way that time and situations work. You can't go back. So there's a sense in which your situation and your context right now is unique. But I think that it's harder to get people unhooked from not helpful connotations because, like I said, quiddity has to do a lot more with appreciating an ordinariness that's there.
Like chairs. There's nothing particularly special about chairs, but there is a quality that makes them a chair, I guess.
Correct.
It's chairness. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. You mentioned that kind of like, I guess, the opposite or the antithesis of quiddity, living with quiddity, is withdrawal rather than investing in the thing. How do you see that playing out in our culture? And where do you think that attitude comes from?
I would say the antithesis of quiddity, I would like the idea escapism a little bit better from withdrawal. Withdrawal is a little bit more passive, and that's fine. I think withdrawal is rolled up into escapism, and the two meld together. But I mean, I'm not revealing any grand secrets when I say the place that this comes is through our phones, primarily, the internet more broadly, but specifically it's a phone thing. It's you see anymore. There was a study a while ago. I don't remember who did this. This was in the early age of cell phones, and it was noticing the habit similarity between the way people used to use cigarettes to the way that people were starting to use their phones. That in a spare moment, in a downtime, people used to go and have a cigarette. And now you go and you look at your phone. The difference, of course, being when you have a cigarette, there's a possibility of social connection. Now you're getting lung cancer, but there's a case to be made that being on your phone all the time might actually be worse. So that's what's happening. It's that, what goes with your phone is an inherent escapism. Your head is bent down. You are absorbed into something that is dictated around your whims. It is cultivated to you. That's the point of the technology. It's not to bash on technology. That's the way it should work. It's a good technology. You customize it. Wonderful. Your phone can serve you, your purposes and your individual needs. That's what a tool should do. But it's also at the same time understanding the phone is an active tool. And what I mean by that is it's not like a hammer. It's not like a car. It's not a paintbrush, whatever, right? That like you use and you use for your purposes. There's someone using you on the other side of this. You are being consumed as you believe that you're consuming something else. And all of that to say, functionally, to come back to quiddity, what happens with your phones is increasingly the world of your phone is a place, this is getting a little theological here, but it's a place that very closely resembles you being God. That you get to control, you get to manipulate, you get to tune in and tune out. These things are entirely there to serve you, to gratify your needs and your desires, and to serve you. You are God of your phone, versus when you live in the real world, you are very much not God. And you're forced to contend with that all the time, in that you look around a lot of times and the world is not the way that you want it to be. And the phone gives you the illusion that your phone is what you want it to be. Now, of course, that is an illusion, because there's people operating the apps that are drawing you in all the time as well. But there's much more of an illusion, I think, in the phone of control.
I can't remember where I saw this, but I'm pretty sure I read somewhere someone saying maybe the reason why we live in such a godless age is that we don't go outside very much anymore. We don't look at the stars, and it's hard to feel big when you're in a thing that is so much bigger than you. How does quiddity, play into that idea?
Yeah, I think I remember several times John Piper drew this illustration as far as why do people go to the Grand Canyon? I think it's one of the beautiful things actually living here, in the West, particularly the Mountain West, where I live in Boise, that one of the big draws here, I don't dislike it. I'm not a big nature outdoors person. I'm very much raised on the indoors, but people love here specifically coming to get outdoors. And John Piper would illustrate many times, what is the point of going to the Grand Canyon? It's not that you feel accomplished. It's not that you feel great. It's not that you feel like you had a really fun time, so to speak. Like none of those things, the Grand Canyon isn't doing any of those things for you. It actually makes you feel small. But it is that smallness of yourself that actually elevates the soul. You find a greater sense, you are locating a greater sense of yourself because you have lost yourself for that moment. You forget about yourself in something bigger. And it's putting his finger on but that's why else would somebody want that, except that there's something in our souls that wants to be taken up and out of ourselves into something bigger, ultimately, which is God. Quiddity, I think, rightly understood, because some of the tension here when you start talking about quiddity and givenness is this starts this starts weaving very closely into the worldview of Buddhism. And there's a reason why Buddhism, I think, and Eastern spirituality has increasing draw on people in the West and people in the 21st century as a whole, because it gets a hold of a lot of these same principles of getting outside of yourself. But what happens, rightfully understood in a Christian focus towards quiddity, is that you see the thatness of the circumstance that you are in as designed by a creator who loves you. And there is a personal connection with this God. It's not just an abstract, impersonal universe, but that God has actually designed the very time, place, circumstances you're in with the explicit purpose of you discovering him in that. And you will not discover him in that if you try to then manipulate the world to be something you would rather it be. So for example, I mean, one of the examples Lewis uses, you're out on a windy, cold, rainy kind of day, and you don't really discover God if you're in that. You will have a very hard time if you're just griping and upset about the fact that it's windy and cold and miserable. There are things to see about the power, the replenishing of God, the work of his in light versus darkness and other things like that within that explicit circumstance that you won't get to when you just feel like, oh, well, this is a crummy day. I mean, I think that's reasonable to feel that way.
I mean, you describe enjoying quiddity as givenness. Like you've used the term givenness a number of times now, and just seeing things as even like ordinary things as like gifts from God. You mentioned gratitude too, and perhaps the giftedness of the things that God gives us and the times and the places, and the gratitude goes together. How do you see gratitude helping us lay hold of the ordinary things that God gives us to just enjoy?
I don't know that it is, because I think that gratitude is, I just think it's foolishness to talk about gratitude as if it's easy. I would be hypocritical if I was doing this. I don't feel like a particularly grateful person a lot of the times. And I don't think gratitude is easy to come by. At least understanding that gratitude is a key can be helpful in that. Okay, so I'll use an example here. Let's say that you're parenting a young child and the child just starts, this never happens. Child starts crying and screaming. Gratitude in that moment is not a matter of saying, good, this is the best of all possible worlds. That I just hope this child keeps screaming forever. Like that is preposterous. And so there's something there that you have to press in to get something deeper. If you start thinking about, well, what is there that I can be grateful for? It's not, the sharp, bone-jarring cry of your child. Heaven, there's going to be no tears and no crying. Like, it's actually a product of a broken and sinful world that we live in. But I think within that, there's something that can be seen of God is my Father. He hears, he cares when I cry, when I'm in pain, when I'm in distress, even if it's illegitimate. He is not deaf to those cries. And he loves me and he meets me in that. Now, I'm not saying that's, oh yeah, you just snap your fingers and like, of course, now suddenly that experience of a crying child is transformed for you. But there's a pathway there. Nor am I saying like, oh yeah, I've always mastered that. But what I'm trying to point to is that there's a pathway there that's not, okay, I just need to check out. I need to get on my phone. I need to find something that gets me out of that. There is something more, even in hardness, right? In hardships, in difficulties, that's not denying the difficulty of what that is, because I think that that's not what God would have us do. But it's learning to see something more about who God is within that.
Well, my guest today is Justin Poythress. He is the pastor at All Saints Presbyterian Church in Boise, Idaho, and author of Embrace Life by Enjoying Quiddity and Who Am I and What Am I Doing with My Life? Finding Stability and Purpose in Jesus. I'm kind of hearing you say is rather than like letting opportunities go by for reminiscing about God's character, rather taking the opportunity to be intentional about building habits of thought that see God's character through even difficult circumstances.
Yeah. And I think, look, at the very least, okay, I always want to try to bring this down to a realistic level. I think part of the problem is you can over spiritualize things, and you make it just sound so nice, and nobody actually lives in that realm. And so I think at the very least, what we should be inclined to is, let me realize here in this moment of a crying child that I want to look at my phone and just get out of this, and just recognize, even just to slow it down to that level. Because for some of us, that has become so habitual, so instinctual, you don't even realize what you're doing. And so to at least even have the circumspection to say, what I'm doing here as I drift away from this work project and I meander my way through the nethers of the internet, or whatever it is, what I'm doing here is because I don't actually like this moment. All right, just even taking that step, I think, gets you one step closer to what happens if I sit in this boredom, this unpleasantness. And then that then gets you one step closer to, where is God in this? What does God want me to see? So I don't know necessarily that you're making every single step along that chain, up or down, whatever it is, towards God all at once. But I think at the very least, we have to recognize there is something very tangible or very important about the depth of our souls that is being lost, that is being continually cut off as we seek to just immerse ourselves in screens in order to escape the specifics of the situation.
You title your article, "You're Embracing Your Life by Enjoying Quiddity." There's something about our escaping into our screens that you observe, I guess, that kind of prompts us actually to be living less than human.
You are shortchanging yourself. I always hesitate, and I want to bring in the other side of this whenever I start going down this road, because I think that there is a strain of Christianity within Christian that's not bad, but it can be overreactionary against technology. Oh, technology is evil. Technology is of the devil. Throw it all out. Never watch a movie. No, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. And that, whatever. I mean, you want to go the way of the Amish, that can kind of work, but generally what happens is that Christians just find themselves one generation behind, and they're like, oh, okay, maybe we do need to adapt to this. And so it's understanding technology in itself, whether it's the internet, whether it's AI, whether it's a tool. It's not to say, okay, this needs to be wholesale rejected, but it's to understand the costs that can come with this. I'm not saying it's all of the costs, but one of the very large costs is that being in your phone generally, I mean, I'm not going out on any limbs here, generally makes you more unhappy. Okay. Why? A big reason for that is because your real life is happening all around you. And so when you continually unplug and disconnect from your real life because it's not satisfying, and then you're living, with your 1 foot in real life, 1 foot in this alternate reality, you're split apart and you are not really ever fully present. You start training yourself to not really be able to enjoy reality as it comes to you.
We think of sloth as being lazy, not being willing to work. But I think classically, at least according to like medieval writers, they thought of sloth really as a spiritual despair. Thinking that there is actually nothing worth doing because God is not sovereign, or something like this. To this point of embracing quiddity and living in the moment, being present, I guess is what we call it, and taking the time to experience. It seems to me that even prompts action. If we see a moment that is like, well, this is not how the world should be, or this is wrong, if we are present in that moment and we are ready to embrace it, it would prompt us to go and do something about it. How does that play into living better and embracing life?
Absolutely. I think that's a very good sort of reorientation of what sloth is, that's very accurate to our current mode, in that, that there's nothing really around worth engaging in. I think that one of the things that happens, and that's why it's no accident that you see just all around us in the world all of these solutions of mindfulness and talking about being present. It doesn't take a Christian to grasp that. I think what the Christian has is I can be present with a personal relationship of Jesus within this moment. You look at the person of Jesus, he does extraordinary things. He's doing signs and wonders. He's healing people, but he also does a lot of ordinary things. And he doesn't trade one as better than the other. Now, the Bible might not record every time Jesus is eating and going to the bathroom, but he does it. And he's very much living those moments. He's not less than Jesus suddenly when he enters into those things or just having conversations. I think that's really valuable for us to grasp, that importance to Jesus is not measured in the way that we as human beings have metrics for importance and value and interest and excitement. It's your closeness to him, your resting, your communing with him. Again, this is why the paradigm of Christianity is a relationship, because you understand with a close friend, a spouse, whatever it is, that relationship, you are going to form some particularly potent memories, likely on your vacations, on your very cool, extravagant kind of experiences. But the potency of that relationship can also come with sitting on a couch, having a soda, having a beer, whatever, and nothing else, like you're just sitting there and you connect meaningfully with that person. Or while you're trying to do a chore together, that's still your relationship. And that's still just as important for you to press in and enjoy the person. I'm not saying it's easier, it's usually harder, but it's still just as much your life.
We live in a culture, I have heard it said, that churches do need to keep eyes out for how that culture affects our worship, affects our doctrine, affects our practice, this sort of a thing. How do you think we are doing in this regard in a culture that is increasingly disembodied, escapist? What could we do better?
There's two things that occur to me. I would say, first, I would just commend the very simple value of going to church. I think I saw some graph about how often people think about the big questions of life or something like that, or have a sense of meaning and purpose to their life. And unsurprisingly, people who are regular church attenders, this is much higher. The reason for that is when you go to church, every time you go to church, if the church is worth anything, you're sitting there thinking about big questions. And it just doesn't happen. That does not happen. And it happens increasingly less and less and less. And so simply going to church and not being glued to a screen in front of you and rushing around and trying to multitask 5 different things, but being present in that space around people, listening to a guy talk. I mean, who does that? You listen to somebody talk for 30 minutes. They're 30 minutes. TED Talks don't do that. But it's like what happens is you are drawn into and forced and pressed to do something we just almost never do anymore. And I would further encourage, I think, something that churches can perhaps do more of, things like communion or prayer or whatever it is, building in some time where you are not being actively engaged, either spoken to or need to respond or sing. I mean, those things are great, but to have a few moments of actual just kind of relative quiet, that is a rare, rare, rare jewel. You just kind of like sit there, you take some time to take communion or something like that, and nothing is really going on. That's amazing. We don't have categories for that. And then I would say other things that we need to do better, and I think are where people are losing out. I would say on the Christian side, I think it's to enjoy quiddity more, to enjoy the thatness more, stay in a church. I mean, this is a really strong product of where we are culturally that I anticipate to continue, is people bounce from church to church to church, because that's how we treat everything else in life. And your church, the longer you stay there, the more things you will find to be dissatisfied in. But if you press into those things, that you can come out on the other side. and say, oh, there's a richness, there's a texture, there's a depth to these relationships and what they're doing to me that I wouldn't get if I just bounced out.
Sort of connected to the last few thoughts that you offered just then. If Christians took quiddity seriously, what changes would you hope to see in their daily lives or in the broader church?
Changes I would expect to see or that we could see if more Christians were saying, yes, I want to embrace, be grateful for the present, the moment. I think, like I said, you would see less church transients because people would realize this community, this people, these relationships that I don't actually really like that much is actually part of the world that God has placed me in at this place and at this time. And you can change what that is, but you're going to come into the same sorts of things and you lose the depth that comes from embracing a specificity and embracing a depth of the thatness of that context. I would also say you kind of hear it in the description itself. I would expect less complaining, less bitterness. I mean, we are, and it goes for myself as well, shockingly entitled and unhappy, discontent people. I think that is largely a reflection of how much time we're immersed in alternate realities that aren't the actual life that you're living. And so I would expect less anxiety. Anxiety comes from, again, not living in the present. Absolutely. I mean, that's a immediate definition. How are you anxious? By definition, it means you're not living in the present. You're anticipating some future problem and you're trying to solve and deal with that. And I would also say that there would be better connection. People would enjoy better connection, better relationships, because they would be present with the people they're with, not wondering, what am I missing out on? What do I need to run to? What tasks do I need to do?
You've been listening to His People on Pilgrim Radio. Many thanks to our guest, Idaho pastor Justin Poythress. We've been discussing his piece, Embrace Your Life by Enjoying Quiddity. You can read it by going to thegospelcoalition.org. On tomorrow's program, we continue our discussion with Justin Poythress. Tomorrow, talking about rooting our identity and calling in Christ.
And what we've got to get over as Christians is the Bible is very upfront about the fact that identity isn't self-made. It isn't fabricated by yourself. You form your identity in community, in relationship with God and with other people. God himself lives in a relational identity inside the Trinity.
That's tomorrow at the same time, right here on His People. Thanks for listening.